Rain fell like gray silk over Riverside Cemetery, soft and endless, muting color until the whole world was the same cold shade. Beneath a tent of dripping canvas, the coffin waited, polished mahogany, neat as a sentence with no emotion left in it. Maya Rodriguez stood beside it, a black leather jacket clinging to her shoulders, rain crawling down her sleeves like veins. One hand rested on Tommy's shoulder. The other instinctively guarded Sarah at her side. The little girl's fingers twisted in Maya's jeans, small and stubborn, refusing to let go. Across the grave, Eleanor Rodriguez stood flawless in her Chanel coat, pearls unbothered by the weather. Her expression didn't shift even as water touched her cheekbone. Richard, her husband, held an umbrella just wide enough for two and checked his gold watch every few breaths, as though grief had an expiration time. The minister spoke words that tried to sound compassionate, but floated like paper boats in dirty water. Marcus Anthony Rodriguez, he said, devoted son, loving husband, and father. Maya felt the first wound open right there. In the order of those words, son first, husband second, father last. The hierarchy had never changed. Not even now, not even here. She tightened her hold on Tommy's shoulder. He stood still, too still for 8 years old, jaw locked like a man twice his age. Sarah whimpered against her thigh, and Maya lowered a hand to her hair. The rain deepened. It hissed on the umbrella tops and sank into the artificial green turf that ringed the grave like makeup hiding a scar. Behind them, a row of motorcycles gleamed wet under the parking lot lights. The men from Marcus's club stood motionless, leather cuts soaking through, engines silent. Their presence alone changed the air, an unspoken boundary between Maya and the immaculate world across the grave. Eleanor stepped forward first. One white rose, perfect, sealed, like porcelain. She let it fall. The sound it made against the coffin was delicate but final, like a verdict written in small type. Richard followed, dropping his own flower, and then gestured for Maya to come forward with the brief, dismissive movement of a man waving away a nuisance. Maya hesitated. Then she guided Tommy ahead. Sarah clung tighter but came. The three of them crossed the slippery grass as though walking through a dream they couldn't wake from. When they reached the coffin, Tommy reached out and pressed his small palm to the wood. "I'll take care of Mom and Sarah," he whispered, and his voice trembled only at the end. The promise pierced through Maya like heat through metal. She put her own hand beside his, feeling the wood slick and cold under her fingers. "I'll protect them," she whispered back, so soft it was barely sound. "I promise." Eleanor's voice broke the moment, sharp enough to cut through the rain. "The children may visit, supervised. Once proper arrangements are made." The words carried over the open grave like smoke. Maya turned. Rainwater slipped from her hair into her eyes, and she blinked it away without wiping. "Excuse me," she asked, calm but lethal. The minister looked down. Richard pretended not to hear. Only the sound of rain answered her. When the service ended, the crowd thinned with polite murmurs. Umbrellas closed. Engines started. Tires hissed on wet pavement. The leather jackets disappeared one by one until only Maya and her children remained. She stared at the fresh mound of dirt until her vision blurred and cleared again. And then she gathered the kids, her voice a low current. "Let's go home." 3 days later, the house smelled of lemon cleaner and silence. The morning light pressed through the tall windows of the kitchen, touching polished marble, glass cabinets, and the long dining table that had always been too big for family dinners. Maya stood at the counter with a single sheet of paper lying flat before her. The raised gold letters across the top read, "Notice to quit." She ran her thumb along the edge, feeling the weight of it, the deliberate thickness that said it came from money. Eleanor sat at the table like a judge at a hearing. Cream blouse, pearl earrings, posture carved from years of etiquette. Her voice was calm, almost kind. This house belongs to the Rodriguez estate. It's only right that it returns to the family. You'll be provided accommodations. Something appropriate. Richard stood near the window, staring at the driveway where rainwater still collected in shallow pools. His reflection in the glass looked like a man preparing to leave before the conversation ended. The locks will be changed at 6 p.m. sharp. Friday, he said without turning. Appropriate. Maya repeated, the word a bitter taste in her mouth. That's what you call this. Eleanor folded her hands on the table, her smile gentle as a blade. Marcus made choices. You encourage them. But children need stability. Tradition. They'll thank us one day. Tommy's voice floated down from upstairs, light but uneasy. Mom, is it time to pack? Almost, Maya called, not looking away from Eleanor. Just the important things. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her chin lifted slightly, as if pleased that Maya understood her place. I'll make arrangements for the children's schooling once you've settled. Continuity is important. Maya's eyes flicked toward the photo on the mantel. Marcus and her on their wedding day, both of them laughing on the Harley. The city lights blurring behind them. The frame was cheap metal, but it had weight. She walked over and took it down. The screw on the back had always been loose. She tightened it instinctively with her thumb. My son was a generous man, Eleanor said. He believed in seeing the good in people. Sometimes that's a weakness. Maya turned, photo in hand. No, she said quietly. That was his strength. She took the photo, slid it into her tote, and looked around the kitchen. The perfect countertops, the crystal, the clock that had never once struck a moment that belonged to her. She wasn't angry anymore, not in the way Eleanor might have wanted. What she felt was colder, sharper. It was focus. Upstairs, she helped the children pack. Tommy filled a backpack with Lego pieces and his red toy truck. Sarah folded clothes carefully, whispering to her stuffed rabbit as though explaining each step. When Maya zipped the last bag, she looked around the room, knowing she wouldn't see it again. Every item had been chosen by Eleanor. Every rug, every curtain, every lie of comfort. But the children's drawings on the wall were hers, the only color in the house that felt alive. She carried the bags downstairs. Richard moved aside as she passed. Eleanor watched, eyes cool and triumphant, like someone witnessing the correction of an error. Maya said nothing. Words would only feed them. At the door, she slipped on her leather jacket. It still carried Marcus's scent, faint and distant, like a ghost too polite to stay. As she adjusted the collar, her fingers brushed the inner pocket. Something stiff pressed against her knuckles. She remembered the sealed envelope. Marcus's voice echoed in her memory, rough and quiet from that night months ago. If things ever get bad, you'll know when to open it. She didn't look inside. Not yet. She pressed her palm over it instead, feeling its shape, the weight of paper that seemed heavier than it should be. It was waiting. Patient, like an engine under a tarp. She turned to Eleanor one last time. Friday at 6, she said. You'll have your house. Eleanor smiled, soft and satisfied. It's for the best. Maya opened the door. The afternoon light was thin but dry. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and motor oil from the garage, where Marcus used to tinker. Tommy and Sarah stood beside her, each holding a small bag. They didn't look back. Mom, Tommy asked, where are we going? Somewhere safe, she said. Somewhere ours. They stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing the house and its ghosts. The gravel path gleamed from the last of the rain, and Maya's boots left firm prints across it. She walked toward the old Harley still parked at the curb, black paint dulled by weather but ready. She tightened the strap on the tote, making sure the envelope inside wouldn't shift. The wind lifted, cool and clean. For a brief moment, she could almost hear Marcus's laugh. Quick, bright, defiant. She didn't smile, not yet. She had promises to keep. As she helped the children into the car, she glanced back at the house one last time. Through the tall window, the clock in the foyer ticked toward Friday. Her hand settled over the inner pocket of her jacket, feeling the envelope resting there like a secret heartbeat, waiting for its hour. Then she turned away and drove into the soft gray light, the rain finally letting go. By the time Maya left the hill for the flat grid of streets, the storm had thinned to a soft veil, a careful hand wiping color off the day. The wipers sighed across the glass and then rested, and the car filled with the modest sounds of children trying to be brave. In the back seat, Sarah held her rabbit under her chin and watched the world slide backward. Tommy sat with his backpack upright between his knees, yav set, eyes scanning the curb numbers, as if counting could hold the road together. Maya drove without music. She felt each mile like the slow turn of a stubborn bolt, the threads catching, the body tightening. The house behind them was perfect and finished and false. What she owned now lived in 2 bags and a leather jacket and the quiet courage of 2 small faces. Her right hand kept the car straight. Her left hand drifted once toward the inner pocket of the jacket. Paper pressed back against her palm. A sealed edge kissed the tender part of her thumb, and she let her hand fall to the wheel again, choosing patience the way a mechanic chooses the right tool before force. They do not know he hid offshore trusts and set a lawyer to contact her. At the next light, she breathed once, deep enough to taste rain and rubber, and turned toward a strip where motels clustered near the freeway, like animals who had learned to sleep standing. Neon curled along eaves and blinked vacancy in friendly red. The sign above the office read sunset, a promise or a warning depending on the hour. Maya pulled into the far corner, the parking space that let her back sit against a wall, and studied the angles, the way she would study a work bay, before she rolled under a chassis. "Is this the place with the pool?" Sarah asked, hope tucked into the sentence like a coin under a doormat. "This one has swings," Maya said. "The playground is behind the office. Swings are good." Tommy decided in the tone of a foreman who has accepted a workable plan. The office bell made a small plucked note when she opened the door. Inside smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee and the paper dust of too many forms. A woman in a cardigan looked up from a ledger. Her eyes were quick and practical. Her mouth knew how to say no without apology, and yes without pretense. She measured Maya, then the children through the glass, then returned to Maya, as if the math added up enough to proceed. 2 beds for 3 nights, Maya said. "Cash." The woman nodded once and turned a registration pad, pen chained to it. Maya wrote her name carefully, each letter a stake tapped into hard ground. When the blank for address glared up, she wrote the word temporary and then the street name, neat and square. The woman read the line and let a small light of respect cross her face. "Room 237 around the back," the woman said. "Playground is behind the office. The slide gets slick after rain." She stamped a receipt with a thick rubber stamp that thunked the counter and left blue numbers crisp as a bruise. The date sat there. Precise, undeniable. Maya slid the stamped paper into her tote beside the folded notice to quit so that one truth pressed against another. The stairway flexed as she climbed. A reminder that weight always says something. A man in a stained tank smoked at the far rail and looked away when Maya looked at him. Someone argued in a voice clipped by embarrassment behind a closed door. The keycard flashed red once, green the next, and the lock gave up with a polite click. The room was cleaner than its signs suggested. Industrial disinfectant, pretended loyalty. Old smoke lurked in the carpet. Two double beds in floral spreads so faded the flowers could have been anything. A table beneath a window looking out on chain link, and a lot of stacked pallets. The bathroom door hung a little low on one side. A hinge tired of pretending. It would all do. It would do tonight. Sarah placed the rabbit on one bed with ceremony and patted its stitched head for luck. Tommy set his backpack on a chair like a flag in a new country. Maya unzipped her tote and brought out the wedding photo first. Two young faces grinning on a Harley. A city behind them blur bright as a dare. She wiped a thumbprint from the glass and angled it so the light caught joy, not glare. Then the papers came out. Insurance forms, copies of certificates. The folded notice to quit with its weighty raised seal. She stacked them left to right, oldest to newest, kitchen drawer to motel table. Next to them she laid the motel receipt, the room slip carbon where the desk clerk had signed, the number printed in rough blue, chain of small certainties. Her finger rested on the stamped date, a muscle in her hand pinched and released. Not fear, not yet, but a clock waking in bone. Hungry? She asked. Two nods. The word McDonald's floated from Sarah like a wish on a string. They ate in the quiet with the television on a soft murmur of jokes that ended neatly in under half an hour. Tommy counted fries to share and made them even. Maya sipped coffee gone thin and sweet and did the arithmetic of days in the back of her head. Cash, rent, food, a sliver left for a surprise, which was another word for a problem you could not yet name. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit her face in motel light. The name on it read Big Jim in letters. She did not have to read twice. She watched the phone vibrate a second time, a third time, then turned it face down. She had love for people who offered help, and she had pride, the scar tissue of a life survived by showing up. She would do this. Later, she would call him back and say thank you. Not yet. The two words kept her spine straight. After dinner, Tommy came to the table, serious as a clerk. He studied the paper stacks and the picture. This is not home, he said, not complaining, simply aligning information. It is for now, Maya said, tapping the table once. We have us. We have a plan to make. And we have the bike. He nodded, and some tightness left his shoulders. The bike meant movement. Movement meant options. Options meant oxygen. Sarah lay on her stomach and drew under the lamplight with a broken crayon she would never throw away. She made 3 careful figures and a motorcycle that looked like a smile, and wrote my family in big letters that leaned to the right like they were climbing. Maya slid the drawing into her wallet behind her license, so the plastic would keep the paper safe. Keep the children close where hands reach for impulse items felt right. Later she tucked them in. 2 different breaths filled the space between the beds. Maya lay on the thin carpet between them, jacket folded under her head like a pillow and a promise, face toward the door. She let the darkness settle around the edges and listened to the building breathe. Pipes whispered, someone laughed through a wall. The relief kind, not the happy kind. A truck idled and moved on. Her hand found the inner pocket without looking. The envelope made a faint sound. The hush of paper saying here when roll was called. She pictured Marcus's handwriting on the front, the sure slope of his letters, the way he never rushed a message, because he believed in building things that would hold weight. She imagined where he would have paused as he wrote, where he might have smiled to himself, because he knew her, because he knew she would wait for the right moment. Not now, she told herself, and felt the calm of choosing later on purpose. Not now did not mean never. Not now meant she would be ready. In the morning she went to the office for coffee and for courage. The woman in the cardigan saw the gloves in Maya's back pocket. the clean stripes, where a wrench had polished the leather smooth over years, and nodded to an unspoken question. "Any work?" Maya asked anyway, voice low, respectful of the favor she was asking and of the pride she was spending. "Room 212, the woman said. "If you want it, it is there. Bring the linens to the cart. Watch your back on the bathroom tile." "Thank you," Maya said, simple and full. She set the coffee down and pulled the gloves on. The fit made her shoulders drop a fraction. Fit was a kind of home. She worked. She scrubbed a sink that had been used as a frying pan by someone who did not own a stove. She knelt on tile and made it clean enough that a child could sit there without picking up a story they did not need. She rolled sheets tight and learned the way this building's vacuum vibrated at the edge of a clog. She lined up a row of hotel soaps like soldiers. She found a single hoop earring beneath a bed and placed it on the office counter in case someone returned for the small circle that had tried not to be lost. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She looked at the screen and saw Big Jim again. She let the call pass. Not yet. "Brother," she thought, and picked up the spray bottle and the rag, and made another mirror shine. When the call ended, a text arrived. "You do not have to carry this alone." She typed and erased and typed again, and settled on "working today, will call tonight." He sent back a single word that hurt and helped at the same time. Proud. At lunch she opened the tote and checked the money again, fingers tapping the quiet math. The motel receipt lay beside the insurance forms, the room slip carbon beside the notice to quit. She moved them into tidy piles, left to right, so the story went in only one direction. She added the paper from the office with the hours she had cleaned, and the woman's initial looping into itself to seal agreement. Evidence wanted order. Order made courage easier to find. From the playground drifted the clink of chain and the squeak that says swing. Sarah's laughter rose and thinned, and rose again like a small bird. Tommy counted under his breath and pushed at the top of each count so the arc stayed true. Wind rattled the fence, and the sky flirted with sunlight without committing. Maya placed her palm on the motel receipt again. The blue date pressed against her through the thin paper. A hum started in her chest, the low pitch of a countdown that did not need a clock to be believed. Friday at 6. Their sentence, Herr Hinge, late afternoon softened the lot into a gray that forgives. A motorcycle rolled in and settled. 2 helmets, 2 voices, the brief high note of a laugh cutting and clean. The sound entered Maya. The way a remembered smell can change the shape of your lungs. She let it pass through. She closed the tote and smoothed the jacket, and laid her hand once more on the inner pocket. The envelope rested there, weight measured, promise compact. Soon, she told herself, told the air between, not now, but soon. When evening slid the color down a shade, Maya gathered the paper stack again. Wedding photo, insurance forms, notice to quit, motel receipt stamped clear and hard, room slip carbon, signature looping back on itself. She set them in a row like stepping stones across a dark creek. Then she placed the envelope beside them without opening it, looked at it the way a person looks at a road that will carry them out of a county and into a life. The seam kept its secret, his letters kept their angles. She could almost feel the intention inside, like heat trapped in a small engine, waiting for a spark. Sarah fell asleep with a crayon stain on her thumb. Tommy fell asleep with his truck under his palm. The building exhaled again, a long-held breath. Maya sat at the table one last time with the lamp low and the door in her line and the window in her other line. She turned the wedding photo so the 3 faces watched over the 2 small bodies. She pressed her hand to the jacket, leather to palm, paper to leather, pulse to paper, and felt the slow, firm knock of a future finding their exact room. Outside, the sign buzzed sunset in red, and inside, the word soon settled beside. Not yet, like two tools set side by side on a clean rag. Ready. Morning parceled the motel into manageable squares of light. A pale stripe slid across the floral bedspread like a ruler someone had laid down and forgotten, and dust floated in it, as if the air were learning to measure itself. Maya woke on the thin carpet between the two beds and stretched until the ache in her shoulders turned into something she could set aside. For a few quiet breaths, she watched her children sleep. Tommy lay on his side with one hand hooked through the strap of his backpack, as if a muscle could decide to drag their lives to safety, while the rest of him dreamed. Sarah sprawled diagonally, hair like a small storm, the rabbit pressed under her chin, until its stitched ear bent and stayed that way. The room smelled like last night's salt, and the stubborn lemon of disinfectant, and beneath those, the gentler scent that follows rain when concrete remembers how to be kind. At the sink, water ran warmer than expected. In the mirror, Maya looked a little older and a little more precise. She tied her hair back, slipped into the leather jacket, and felt the sealed envelope resting against her ribs through the inner pocket. It was not comfort so much as a location. She touched it once the way a mechanic taps a gauge. Not now, she thought. Not yet, but I know exactly where you are. By the time the office window clicked open for the day, she had traded the jacket for gloves. Rosa, the owner, handed over a printed sheet with room numbers and tidy columns for initials and time. The paper had that faint grit of carbon copies, one truth pressing into the next. Maya signed her name beside the first room and wrote the hour in careful letters. The pen scratched. The impression bled a little into the sheet beneath. Evidence layered itself without needing permission. Work met her without ceremony. She stripped bedspreads that had learned every shade of human fatigue and made corners sharp enough to pass inspection. She found a hairpin beneath one mattress and a shirt button in a fold of carpet, and set both in a dish on the office counter labeled with a promise, lost for now. She scrubbed a ring of gray from a tub and then polished the faucet until it caught the window and threw clean light back. The vacuum roared, and then coughed at a hidden clog. She cut the power, flipped the latch, and knocked grit loose with the knuckles of someone who has learned to unblock stubborn systems without breaking them. Each mirror she left behind reflected a person she would be willing to look in the eye. Her phone buzzed in her pocket while she wrestled an unforgiving fitted sheet. She glanced. Big Jim. She let it hum to the end, face steady, and turned the phone face down on the cart. Not yet was not a refusal. It was a plan. An hour later, with coffee that tasted like determination and plastic, she typed a message anyway. Working today. Will call tonight. The reply came back like a hand on a shoulder. Proud of you. No pressure. Family if you need. She set the phone next to the printed sheet and signed 2 more lines. The loops of her initials grew firmer by repetition. The Times built a small ladder down the page. Outside, the swings sang in the wind. Through the window, she watched Tommy brace himself like a metronome and push Sarah with a measured rhythm that said, order could be a superpower. The chain-link fence whispered. 2 kids in clean sneakers paused on their way to school and peered through the diamonds of wire. Motel kids, one said, and the other added homeless, with the throwaway meanness of children who have learned to test boundaries with words. Sarah slid off the swing, her mouth small, her eyes too big, and carried her rabbit like an anchor across shallow water. They said we are homeless, she announced, making it sound like a fact she could file rather than a stone she had to swallow. "We have a home today," Maya said. "This room is ours. That makes it a home, and we have each other. That makes it better than a lot of houses." Sarah's chin wobbled and then set. Tommy stepped in behind her with the weight of a guard and put his backpack on the bed like a declaration of jurisdiction. He met Maya's eyes. "We will be fine," he said without sound, and she heard it anyway. At late morning, a dark rectangle glinted beneath their door. Maya bent and slid a business card into her palm. The paper was thick, the gray, a shade that felt expensive to the touch. The letters raised as if they had been set by hand. Jonathan Whitmore, attorney at law. Beneath the address, written in neat ink, sat a time and a day. Tuesday, 10. She stood still in the hall while the building hummed around her. For a breath she nearly laughed at the precision of fate, and then chose stillness instead. She pinned the card to the corner of the metal fridge with a weak magnet and pulled the motel calendar from the drawer. She circled the square for Tuesday and wrote the hour beside it in letters. Then she turned back a page and looked at Friday, and the words from the house returned like a draft under a door. "Locks change at 6. The remembered sentence carried its own sound, heavy and exact. For a moment she heard a clock, the one in the foyer of the Rodriguez house, the thick second hand shouldering its way around the face. Tick, tick. The ghost of it moved the air. She pressed her thumb to the calendar and breathed until the echo faded. Tuesday. First, work again. She wrestled a sink that had forgotten to be kind and a mirror that made everyone look tired. She found an apology in the wastebasket, a note written in ballpoint on a napkin that started with the word sorry and ended without names. She emptied it with the same care she gave anything true. When she ran out of clean rags, she washed them in a sink with water hot enough to steam her knuckles, and wrung them out until her wrists remembered every bolt she had ever convinced to surrender. Rosa watched her cross the walkway with the eyes of someone who could feel weather an hour before the sky admitted anything. "You know engines," she said, nodding toward the Harley, black beads of last night's rain still stitched along its tank. Since I could see over a bench, Maya answered. "My nephew has a bike that hates second gear and sounds like a jar of screw." Rosa said, "He pays if it runs. I pay if you keep him from wasting money." "Bring it Saturday," Maya said. "I will look. I promise the truth. Not miracles." Rosa's mouth tilted. "A wager accepted. Bring your own tools. I have a tarp." In their room after lunch, Maya spread a towel and laid out what the day had handed her. The wedding photo, insurance papers smoothed flat with the side of her hand, the stamped motel receipt, the carbon slip for the room, desk clerk's signature looping back into itself, the cleaning sheet with initials and times marching down the page like a line of small good soldiers. She added the business card back up so the appointment faced her. Small true things arranged in a row became a bridge she could set a foot on. Sarah colored beside her, tongue trapped between teeth, letters printed in uneven purple above 3 stick figures, and a long smiling motorcycle. "Today," she wrote, pressing hard enough to dent the paper. Tommy drew a chessboard on notebook lines and walked a knight through patterns that made sense to him. Maya hummed the low sound she made when problems began to resolve under her hands. Dusk softened the edges of the parking lot. A construction worker with sunburned wrists and the careful posture of a person who tried not to take up space came into the office with a story about a truck that would not turn over unless threatened. Rosa tilted her chin toward Maya and did not have to say anything. Out under the open hood, in light that had gone the color of a nickel, Maya listened. The starter whined without engaging. The engine answered like a friend who had locked the door by accident. She checked the terminals and the cables. White crust clung where metal should meet, like frost pretending to be pure. Loose ground, she said, and tightened the clamp with the little wrench that never left her tote. Try again. The truck woke as if someone had called its name in the right tone. Relief made the man younger. He reached for his wallet, and she shook her head once, and then stopped shaking because money mattered. He paid what he could, promised what he could not yet, and offered something worth as much as cash. My boss has 4 trucks that need ears, he said, handing her a number scribbled on a gas receipt. She added the slip to her line of papers as if it had been waiting for the space. Later, a chrome rumble cut the lot and laid a clean line of sound across the evening. Big Jim's bike. She felt it in her sternum before she heard it through her ears. The way a sparrow feels pressure all the way to bone. She kept her eyes on the wrench and on the truck she had just brought back from sulking. When the engine stopped, the air paused with it. He walked over in a way that did not push the world. "You good, sister?" he asked, voice quiet as a large thing can be. "Working," she said, the word steady. "Proud," he said, and he meant the whole scene with one syllable. The tools, the children in the window, the exact set of her jaw. "If you need, I know," she said, and looked at him long enough to show that gratitude did not erase her plan. He tipped 2 fingers to his chest and to the air, a sign meant to stick, even after taillights were gone. Neon thickened. The kids fell asleep sideways, as kids do when the day has taken its full share and left enough for dreams. Maya set the lamp low and made a small stage out of the table. She took the motel calendar back out, circled Tuesday again, and wrote the word lawyer where her eye would not miss it. She placed the notice to quit beside the page, and in her head she underlined the word Friday until the quiet in the room heard it. Somewhere in the back of her mind, the grand clock from the Rodriguez house pressed another heavy second into the world. Tick, tick. It made the motel clock on the nightstand answer with its own thin chatter, and for a heartbeat, the 2 sounds overlapped like strangers who did not know they were humming the same tune. Across town, in a house with too much glass, a black car whispered into a garage, and the door folded down like a mouth deciding what not to say. Richard stepped out with a phone at his ear and a voice that had never learned to bend. "Yes," he said, "Friday, 6 in the evening. Do it properly." Then a pause, and the quiet click of a man ending what he considered a settled matter. Back in the motel, Maya wrote 2 lines in a notebook she had found in the drawer, pages still stiff from never having been used. "Today we work, today we move." She closed the book and put it under the wedding photo, so the words would weigh the picture down or the picture would weigh the words up, whichever the day required. Then she lay on the carpet between the 2 beds, with leather folded under her head, and the envelope a small, steady weight near her heart. She pressed her palm over it, paper through lining through skin, and felt the slow, firm knock of a future that had remembered their exact room number even before she learned to write it in words. Monday peeled the motel from night-like tape-lifting lint. The thin curtains took on a quiet glow, and the stripe of light across the floral bedspread looked like someone had laid a ruler down to measure the day. Maya sat up from the carpet between the beds and rolled her shoulders until the ache turned into a useful heat. Tommy slept on his side, hand threaded through his backpack strap as if a small muscle knew to hold on. Sarah had drifted sideways, hair in a soft snarl, the rabbit tucked under her chin as if it could guard whatever dreams chose to visit. At the sink, the water ran a notch too hot and fogged the glass. She wiped a circle clear with the back of her wrist and saw a face a shade older than yesterday and a degree sharper. She tied back her hair, slipped into the jacket, and the envelope found her ribs through the lining like a quiet knock from another room. Not now had carried her this far, now pressed back. She tapped the pocket once the way a mechanic taps a gauge, then let it go. On the motel calendar, she drew a neat ring around Tuesday and wrote the word lawyer beside the hour in small patient letters. Across the page, Friday sat heavy without asking permission. In the hush, she could hear the memory of the Rodriguez foyer clock, that thick tick that announces consequence. Locks change at 6, Richard had said, and the words still wore a metal edge. The remembered sound stepped into the room, then retreated when the motel clock answered with its thin plastic chatter. Rosa slid an envelope of cash across the office counter, the paper soft from use. A second envelope waited beneath it, thinner than pay, but heavier with possibility. On its face, an address for a garage in Riverside, and a first name penned in block letters. Eddie wants someone who hears what wires say. Rosa murmured, eyes bright, with the realism of a gambler who knows the odds, because she wrote them down herself. 15 an hour to start, and more if your work speaks for you. He can test you today. Sarah sat at the table, feet not touching the floor, arranging colored pencils by length and eating toast in quiet bites. Tommy checked the time by the sun stripe and lifted his pack. The bus would grind away, do its small duty. Maya kissed 2 warm foreheads, felt 2 small weights rise from her, and then felt them settle back in the same breath. When the door shut, the room hummed like a machine that had decided to keep going. Late morning, heat bled from the street, and the garage aired its own weather. Martinez Auto sat low and square, bays open like mouths breathing. The place smelled like old oil and brake dust, and the bright metal scent that makes a person stand straighter. Fluorescence hummed above. An air compressor sighed like a large animal giving in. At the counter, a man with a pencil worn to a stubborn stub and a clipboard that had seen years looked up. Eddie counted her without insult, the way good owners do, and tipped his chin at a sedan, waiting under a lamp that had never learned to flatter. Got a ghost, he said. It dies whenever it wants. We have thrown parts at it like fools. I want ears, not guesses. Maya set her tote down, rolled a cart with a wheel that wanted to argue, and slid behind the wheel. She turned the key and listened. The idol stumbled, recovered, sighed like someone regretting a promise. She popped the hood. In the bay light, the engine looked like a map folded wrong by a stranger. She checked grounds, traced a harness with 2 fingers, wiggled a plug until the idol flinched. Hear that? She said. Eddie came closer without crowding. She unclipped a cheap sensor and did not like the look of its pins. A shop spare waited in a drawer that respected order. She swapped them, and the engine settled into the voice of something that would not shame you at a red light. Eddie did not grin. He scratched 2 notes on the ticket, then 1 on a second pad only he used. We have work if you want it. 15 to start. Commission when you spec because you do not steal. Training only if they earn it. Paper at the counter. Bring your name. He looked at her hands. You are not afraid to clean before you diagnose. That helps. At the office, she filled lines that asked for the sort of answers paper believes in. Name, address, phone. The pen sank a faint impression into the page beneath. Time moved a minute on the wall. She wrote that minute in the margin without thinking. Time likes to be seen. When she returned to the bay, a man in a charcoal suit had installed himself in a plastic chair, as if it had been made for him. His shoes were polished without apology. A briefcase leaned against the chair leg like a well-trained dog. The heat shimmered around him and never touched him. Mrs. Rodriguez, he said. His voice was measured and not oily. He lifted a card between two fingers. Jonathan Whitmore, I represent interests that may concern you, not your in-laws. May we speak when you are not at work? If this is about custody theater, she said, there is nothing to discuss. Until please and thank you are honest words again. Not custody, he said. The matter concerns your late husband's estate. Tuesday morning would suit. His eyes held the courtesy of a person who understands that other people have days to live through. She heard the old clock once more, that confident tick-pushing air. It passed. She looked at the card, then at him, then at the engine idling with new manners. Tuesday, she said. 10. Thank you, he said. The last word did not feel performed. The briefcase snapped shut with a sound designed to satisfy. He walked through the smell of hot rubber and did not pick up any of it as he went. Eddie lifted one eyebrow and returned it to its work. Maya slid the card into the inner pocket behind the envelope. Paper met paper through leather, like old acquaintances nodding in a crowd. The afternoon moved like a good shop day, quick and exact. She chased a parasitic draw through a nest of wires by following the whisper of wrong heat with the backs of her fingers. She labeled the fix in square block letters you could read across a counter. Old Pete in Bay, one tipped his chin, a mechanic's version of a medal. Eddie handed her 2 more tickets without ceremony, which was how a person said you belong here when they refused to waste breath. She gathered the kids when the sun had lowered enough to be gentle. Tommy carried a paper knight. He had cut along perfect lines. Sarah wore a sticker that called her brave for reading to her class. At the motel, the room had cooled into something almost kind. Dinner made the air smell like garlic from a jar and tomato from a can, trying its best. They ate, then drifted into tasks. Knights walked paper squares. Crayons pushed color into corners. The rabbit watched, stitched-eye patient. Maya cleared the table and set out small, true things. Wedding photo. Insurance papers, with their practiced language. Stamped motel receipt. Room slip carbon with the desk clerk's looped signature. Cleaning sheet with initials and times stepping down the page like good soldiers. A gas receipt with a number from a man whose truck now started today's folded bills. She laid the envelope at the end of the line, last in sequence, weight without heaviness. Outside, a motorcycle's note passed clean and was gone. In the quiet, the old foyer clock found her again, thick tick stepping into her chest. This time it did not leave. She sat. She slid a finger under the flap. The paper surrendered with a small, decisive sigh. The scent lifted, faint and human. Ink and paper, and a whisper of the cologne she had bought him in a winter that still sat warm in memory. Documents fanned across the table. Account numbers marched in patient rows. Names of entities she had never said aloud. A list of contacts with cities attached that were not for tourists. Near the bottom, a single line in Marcus's careful hand. Open this only if the worst has happened and they do exactly what I think they will do. Her mouth found a shape between a laugh and a sob and then found a steadier line. She sat taller. A longer letter on torn notebook paper waited underneath, each stroke deliberate. My beautiful Maya, if you are reading this, I did not manage to outlive the danger we could not negotiate. I am sorry for the secret, and for asking you to forgive me from a distance. I built a second life beside the first, so that when the first shattered you, and the children would not, I hid it from my parents because money in their hands is a lever, and in their anger it is a leash. Her fingertip pressed the curve of her name, as if ink could carry a pulse. She read the rest. He told her of a small inheritance, turned sideways and forward into different shapes, of property bought in company names that did not match his own, of funds moved into places where paper law could shield the living from family law. of long nights full of math and short days full of dust, of a trigger he had set so that a lawyer would find her if certain doors were closed against her. He wrote the lawyer's name twice and underlined it once. He gave reasons with humility and asked for forgiveness without excuse. She placed the pages in order and then back in the envelope and then out again because her hands needed work while her head changed rooms. She set the business card beside the letter, and the names aligned in a way that lifted the hairs along her forearms. Tuesday had been written into her life before she knew to circle it. She turned her phone, dialed with the steady pressure she used when tightening anything that matters. A calm voice answered, "Carpet and Abara Feet, Whitmore and Associates." Maya gave her name. The woman offered Tuesday at the hour already inked. "We will see you then," she said. And somewhere a calendar made a small click. Maya wrote in her notebook, "Tuesday confirmed." The neat letters enforced truth. Across town, a table that did not remember scratches hosted a lawyer and two people who preferred outcomes without complications. Title transfer complete. Morrison reported. Rentals prepared. Insurance fund in queue. Eleanor nodded, pleased by an orderly world. Richard stepped into a darker doorway with his phone and spoke low, not from courtesy but habit. "Friday, 6. Do it properly." He returned to his chair as if nothing had moved while he was away. Back in the motel, Maya stacked the papers in a new order. Wedding photo first, because love is the door to any room worth entering. Then the letter, because a voice matters even after it has gone quiet. Then the card and the contacts and the practical pages that would demand pens and windows and patient signatures. She slid them into a folder from the drawer and wrote a word on the tab in square letters. Plan. She lifted Sarah's drawing and set it on top, the purple heart hovering above 3 figures, and a long, smiling motorcycle. Then, after a beat, she reversed the order. So the business card and the list of names faced up. Love could stay close. Logic would be the blade she carried in her boot. Tommy drifted over and placed a hand on her shoulder. A brief squeeze that said, "I trust you louder than words ever manage." He went back to his night. Sarah slid the purple heart closer to the folder edge, as if blessing a machine. Maya tucked the drawing half under the cover so both could be seen. Night cooled the sign outside to a steady red buzz. She washed dinner dishes in water that pretended to be hot and dried them with a towel that had surrendered lint years ago. She turned out the lamp and lay on the carpet between the beds, because that was still the place her body believed as safe. The jacket folded under her head held the shape of her skull. Her palm found the pocket. The envelope was no longer sealed weight. It was aligned, awake, a map with corners finally unfolded. Friday still waited, with its metal voice and its promise of locks. But Tuesday stood nearer now, a door she could touch and turn. In the space between those 2 days, she let a plan breathe, stubborn and small and true, and counted her breaths, until the old clock's tick gave way to her own steady heart. Tuesday came in on clean light that made the motel seem temporary, as if the walls had only been borrowed. Maya pressed Tommy's shirt flat with her palm, kissed Sarah's forehead, and told Rosa she would be gone for the morning and back before the next round of check-ins. Rosa slid an extra key across the counter without commentary, because real kindness does not explain itself. The Harley woke on the first breath, low and steady. Downtown grew taller with each block, until glass buildings began reflecting a sky that looked almost too bright to keep. Her jacket held the faint heat of sun on leather, and the folder labeled in her own careful hand sat snug in the saddlebag, edges nudging her ribs as if reminding her to stay upright. Every light she caught felt less like delay and more like a metronome counting her toward what waited. Whitmore's office occupied the 12th floor of a building that mirrored clouds so cleanly. The sky seemed to be rehearsing itself. Inside, air moved at a polite temperature. The receptionist's blouse and voice matched in poise. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said, with a small smile that did not patronize. "He is expecting you." The conference room gave the city a stage: neat roofs, steel ribs, cranes drawing thin lines into morning. A long mahogany table ran the length of the glass. Whitmore stood by the window, the silver at his temples taking the light like an honest admission. "I am glad you came," he said, and his tone made the sentence about her rather than about him. Maya set her folder down and sat with her back straight. "You said this is about Marcus." He opened a leather file and placed a single sheet in front of her. The top corner was marked with the firm's name in small letters, and the words "Private Estate" beneath columns of figures ran in quiet order. "Your husband set a deliberate process in motion," he said. "His estate bypassed standard channels. You were the key that would turn at the end." "Estate," she said, and heard how small the word sounded when it had meant a house and an insurance policy and a notice on thick paper. "You mean the house?" "The policy." "Not exactly." He slid the rest of the folder forward. Pages of deeds and transfers and notarized letters fanned like a card trick performed without flourish. Each page bore dates and initials, signatures written in Marcus's patient hand. At the top of a summary, the assessment waited in words that did not strain themselves. Total evaluated assets, $237 million. The number did not strike her like a blow. It gathered itself in the air and hung there like a bell tone, waiting for its own echo. "That is not real," she said, not as a protest, but as a way to give the room a chance to breathe. "It is," Whitmore said, without offense. He built a network of companies and funds and trusts over many years. Some began small: repair Chanel, supply lines, quiet investments. He documented everything. He indicated the stamps and signatures with a fingertip. Each date can be verified. Each transaction can be traced. Each account names you as beneficiary and custodian. The chair felt as if it had shifted half an inch. She steadied her hands against the edge of the table and kept her eyes on the papers so the floor would remember to stay level. "Why hide it?" she asked. He anticipated interference. Whitmore said, and did not need to say from whom. "He left instructions that contact with you should be triggered only after a legal displacement from the family estate. I gather that occurred on Friday evening." "It did," she said, and the memory of rain and the word "supervised" and the metallic promise of locks brushed her skin like a draft under a door. He opened another folder. "This is the activation sequence. Clean pages, transfer letters, a power of attorney, a document listing an entity you recognize," he said, and she did. The holding company name he had tucked into the real estate that would one day face Eleanor's garden. "You need not manage everything at once. We will handle verification and taxation and schedules. What you signed today transfers operational control." The pen on the table was silver and exactly balanced, heavy enough to feel like a choice. "You are telling me I have more money than the people who threw my children out of their house," she said, and the air around the sentence sharpened. "I am telling you your husband saw them clearly," Whitmore said, "and that he trusted your judgment more than theirs." She looked out through 12 panes of glass at a city built out of will and steel. Somewhere across it, an old clock was shouldering seconds towards 6. Somewhere a gold watch was being checked and checked again. She looked back at the pen and picked it up. The metal had a faint coolness even in her warm hand. Her name ran across the first line in measured letters. Once for herself, once for the man who had done math in the dark, once for the people who believed she would fold. The ink made a faint shine before it settled. Whitmore turned the page. She signed again and again. Carbon paper took the groove of each stroke, building a small archive beneath the official sheet. With every line, the phrase 237 million stepped closer to the ground and put its feet down. When the legal stack was complete, he closed the folder with the care of a person returning a tool to its place. That is the structure, he said. Now, the reason. From a second file, he drew a glossy rendering. Clean hallways, glass, a wing of machines arranged like a promise. At the top, a name weighted like a headline, Pediatric Cardiac Surgical Suite. Beneath it, the plaque space kept its place. Benefactor to be named. He mentioned a wish to make something that outlasts misfortune. Whitmore said, a way to keep what took him from taking others. The trust can endow an operating unit under your name if you choose. Maya traced the image with her eyes. Monitors, lights, a door with a symbol above it shaped like a heart. The memory of a hospital room she had not been given time to say goodbye in, pressed against her ribs, and then released. Marcus always said the world fixes engines faster than hearts, she said. Then perhaps this is balance, he said softly. She sat back and felt the strange mix of gravity and buoyancy that comes when a map suddenly matches the road. The corporations carried names like rivers and tools and constellations, which was exactly the kind of private joke Marcus would have folded into a ledger. He left me a map, she said, and you are the compass. I simply keep time, he said, and the modesty felt like function rather than performance. The clock on the wall read a little before 11. Sunlight had climbed the glass until it reached the table and made the ink look faintly blue. Maya glanced at her reflection and saw a woman who no longer looked like she was waiting for rescue. Her eyes had the calm of someone who knows a machine and is not afraid to put her hands on it. What happens next? She asked. We move assets through ordinary audits, he said, as if the word ordinary could ever quite belong to what they were discussing. Within 2 days, you will have verified ownership of the companies. You will receive interim access to a central account. I advise discretion. Numbers like these acquire gravity. I have lived under worse gravity, she said, and he allowed himself the smallest smile. When she left, the air on the street felt clean and sharper than when she had arrived. The fountain in the plaza made a sound like a coin falling forever. She opened the saddlebag, slid the signed folder inside, and then did something she had not planned. She kept the silver pen in her jacket pocket, proof of decision. When the pen settled, it touched the folded motel receipt and the brittle notice to quit, paper against paper, future against past, and the rub of those edges felt like voltage. She did not start the Harley right away. She stood and let the city move around her, buses carrying strangers and their separate stories, a courier stacking boxes into a van, a woman in heels clicking across stone with the stride of someone who has earned her pace. Somewhere, uptown Eleanor would be tasting the day's second coffee and rehearsing a speech for a room that would nod. Somewhere, Richard would glance at a watch and believe it could tell him more than time. Before either ritual concluded, Maya owned a different future than the one they had tried to script. When she turned the key, the engine answered with a low acknowledgement. The ride back felt shorter. Stoplights looked like small checks on a long list. In shop windows, her reflection did not look like a widow or a refugee. It looked like a person assembling an engine large enough to carry her name across a map. Rosa was at the counter with a magazine when Maya came in. The older woman looked up, read the steadiness in her face, and did not ask a single question that would have required a lie. "The kids are fine," she said. "They found a game with the vending machine that keeps them honest." "Thank you," Maya said, and placed a bill for the extra key where Rosa would not feel observed. "Tuesday treated you decent," Rosa said. "It did," Maya answered, "and Friday will be better." In the room, coins had been stacked into cities on the bed. Sarah looked up first. "Mom, you are smiling." Maya unzipped the saddlebag and set the folder on the table as if it had always belonged there. "We have a lot to talk about," she said, "though not yet everything." She slid out one page, the rendering of the hospital wing, and the two of them leaned close until their hair touched her sleeves. "Your dad wanted to build this for kids like him," Tommy asked, voice quiet. "For kids who need more time," she said. Sarah traced the little heart above the door, as if she were blessing it. "Can we see it one day?" "You will," Maya said. "You will see your name on the wall." The neon sign outside blinked early and washed the curtain with pink. She stood by the window and listened to the road. Somewhere beyond the horizon, her in-laws still believed they owned the future. Let them for a breath longer. She had signatures and receipts, and a silver pen that had learned her name, and a quiet beginning that sounded like justice. Tomorrow she would sit with the strategist Whitmore had recommended and begin turning maps into movement. Friday's clock would tick the way clocks do, heavy and sure, but she had a louder sound to carry now, the hum of her own making, the engine of a life that had finally decided to go. Morning opened like a clean page. The motel room still held that thin smell of disinfectant and old air, yet the heaviness in Maya's chest felt lighter. As if the fog had learned the outline of the sun, she brewed the small packet of coffee and watched the dark thread fall into the plastic cup. 2 slices of bread slipped into the toaster, and the button settled with a small click that sounded like a choice being confirmed. Tommy and Sarah slept a few minutes longer, folded toward the warm middle of the blanket as if gravity, for once, were kind. By the time they sat at the tiny table with buttered toast and a banana halved neatly, Maya had rearranged the dresser into a little altar of facts, a motel receipt with her looping signature, a softened copy of the notice to quit, edges worn from folding and unfolding, a blank sheet labeled plan in square letters. The silver pen slid into her jacket pocket until it touched the folded receipt, paper, brushing metal with a quiet spark. She walked the children to the bus pullout and waited while idling cars exhaled and parents counted lunchboxes. The yellow bus arrived with a sigh of brakes and the faint smell of vinyl and pencil shavings. Tommy climbed aboard with the calm of a player who knows the board. Sarah ran back for one more hug, pressed her cheek hard to the leather of Maya's jacket, then bounded up the steps, braids swinging like a small metronome. The doors folded, the bus swallowed them into its soft light, and Maya let herself close her eyes for the length of a breath. Then she turned toward a day that had already pulled up a chair and set out a pen. Rebecca Chen's office perched above a bakery that knew how to scent a stairwell with patience. Warm yeast, sugar, a promise of crust. Inside the glass door, the air went bright and exact. Plants held their green in white pots. Books stood in the kind of order that makes strangers trust you. A kettle clicked off somewhere behind a partition, and a woman stepped forward with a notebook and a pencil tucked behind one ear. "You must be Maya," she said. "I am Rebecca." Her presence was the steady kind, the kind that holds a room without raising its voice. Tea appeared in cups that made a soft ceramic note against saucers. "Please, sit where you can see the sky," she said. "People decide better when there is an exit above them." They began with the map. Rebecca drew a ladder and labeled rungs with a calm hand. Housing, education, business explanation. She circled the bottom rung and underlined it twice. Gradualism, she said. We build a story the world can believe without you having to narrate it. Maya nodded. She understood story. You are saying we do not let the numbers break the furniture. Exactly. We adjust the furniture and then invite the numbers to sit. She divided a page into 3 columns and wrote careful titles. Family, business, community. Then she added a 4th, its heading small and deliberate. Quiet justice. She lifted her eyes as if asking permission. Maya nodded again. They worked the family column first. A better place to live. Not loud about it. Still in the same school district, with a little yard and a garage that could hold the shape of a future afternoon. Household costs that rose a little without announcing themselves. Doctors paid without drama. College funds that grew in plain sight without shouting. In the business column, Rebecca placed Eddie's expansion where anyone could see it and believe it. Equipment financed through ordinary paper. A lease that made sense to a bank officer who liked neat dates and sensible margins. Apprentices paid by the shop rather than by a mysterious benefactor. All of it signed by the right people in the right order, the way a good chain of custody hums. In the community column, Rebecca wrote 3 small words, anonymous when needed. They spoke about Samson, the veteran whose bills had outrun both insurance and luck, about a mother who could turn a certification into a livelihood if someone would cover the fee, about a teen with more engine in him than school and no place to put it. The air in the office went quiet in a respectful way. Maya knew where she wanted to stand. Your in-laws, Rebecca said at last, you will have to choose when they see what they discarded. The choice will set the temperature of your house for a long time. Not yet, Maya said. I want them to feel the outline of a mistake before anyone names it. Strategy, not spectacle, justice, precise, and without apology. Rebecca considered, then nodded. The firm will support that approach. One more thought. If you decide to position yourself near their social orbit, we will need privacy structures. The words landed and opened a door behind them. Not revenge, Maya said, hearing the old clock in her memory, the way it turned seconds into weapons. Position. She let the word rest on her tongue like a tool. They established signatures. The first wire was small by the strange new measure of her life, and large enough to change a week. The screen slid to a confirmation page. No trumpet, only a line of letters. A bunk stamp. A time. The world registered a movement and adjusted itself. Maya printed the slip and folded it behind the motel receipt, present leaning gently against past. She walked back through sun, bought groceries that made evening feel like more than survival, bread that crackled, fruit that did not bruise under a glance, cheese with a story in its scent. At Martinez Auto, she set the bag on the counter, and Eddie looked up from a ledger, read the grin correctly, and lifted a grease-striped finger that meant later. She spent the afternoon under bay light and dust, finding a charging fault by touch, and by the way a wire lied to a gauge. She wrote clean notes on a work order and snapped a photo of a corroded ground and attached it, because evidence is a way of loving tomorrow. Old Pete rolled past with a cart and gave her the sideways nod. That means you are in when men do not want to say so. On break, she sat on the step by the roll-up door and texted Big Jim. Heard about Samson. The reply landed like a hand to a shoulder. We are holding a ride and a dinner. No pressure. Do what feels right. Hot asphalt breathed up through the day. Maya opened her banking app and moved money through a shell. Rebecca had named so ordinary it could pass through any lobby. The gift would arrive as a success from a local business, whose month had been kind. She saved the confirmation page with the time legible and filed it under receipts. Then she texted back, business has been kind this month. The phone buzzed. You show up quiet and heavy. Sister, we see you. After shift, she drove the children to a small house on a tidy strip of street where neighbors wave with hands. Not chins, 2 bedrooms and a nook that could become a third if someone believed in walls made of bookcases, a shallow garage for a future project. The leasing agent wore clicking shoes, and a smile that understood down payments better than feelings. Maya wrote employer names, and pay that Rosa could corroborate with a phone call delivered in Rosa's straight voice. The agent shook her hand and said, "Approved," as if the word had been waiting there all along. They moved in small art, beta groceries, an art class for Sarah where color gave her a bigger vocabulary, chess club for Tommy, 2 afternoons a week, a Saturday tournament that had the decency to be dry, a rug that made bare feet sound like home, a used desk beneath a window where morning could find her. On that desk she placed a file sorter. In the first pocket she slid the hospital rendering like a family photograph. In the second she slid work orders by week. In the third a folder labeled foundation with the word draft written smaller below. In the fourth a manila envelope stamped with a simple name, Hillrest. She did not open it. Not yet. Instead she called Whitmore. "I want to position myself near my in-laws, without placing my name where their friends can touch it," she said. He understood. "We can purchase through a holding company with no visible link," he said. "A few owners are listening. Divorce, liquidity, the usual reasons people accept numbers they would not accept yesterday." He asked a handful of questions that were really a security plan. She answered without tremor. "We will buy a roof, not a spotlight," he said. "We will put curtains where curtains belong." Maya looked at the envelope on her desk and let a second image bloom behind it. It would not be a place to live. Not first. It would be a mirror, placed at the correct angle, reflecting light straight into Eleanor's immaculate parlor. A reminder, every morning, that the future can take the house across the street and sit there quietly, breathing. She ended the call and let the quiet settle. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked and purred. She poured hot water over leaves that opened like a good story, and waited the right number of heartbeats. Steam climbed into her sinuses and swept the corners. The first sip laid warmth down her tongue and said, "Stay." Evening brought the choreography of small lives. Tommy spread knights and bishops and explained a trap from a creased library book. Sarah painted a heart, then a gasket, then a heart again, as if the world required both to run. The television murmured a laugh track she did not speak. After dishes and the gentle negotiation of bedtime, the apartment inhaled and went still. Maya sat at the desk and opened a fresh page in a plain notebook. She wrote a list. Registration check for the art class. Equipment lease structure for Eddie. To root through a bank that loves dates and margins. Foundation charter, words that sound like dignity, not headlines. A hospital meeting without being introduced as anyone's guest. A message to Rebecca to review addresses that would change the view from her morning window. She set the pen perpendicular to the paper, because order tells the truth. From the jacket on the chair, she drew the motel receipt and placed it beside the wire slip. The past did not vanish. It took a seat and learned its manners. Her phone buzzed. Eddie. Got a lead on the transmission shop next door. Numbers look doable if the bank behaves. Also got a call from a lawyer poking at our partnership. Nose forward. I told him to talk to our lawyer if he had standing. You good. Maya smiled and typed. Better than good. Bring your numbers in the morning. I have a lease structure the bank will think it invented. As for the caller, he is tied to my former in-laws. They have started looking. She paused, slid her hand into her pocket, and touched the silver pen, cool as a promise. I have tools. She turned out the light and left the desk squared to the window. In the bedroom, she lay down and listened to a car whisper past in the street below. Somewhere across town, an old clock counted seconds like coins. Let it count. She had decided to count different things. Inside the manila envelope labeled Hillrest, a listing waited on heavy paper, patient as stone. A tidy stamp sat in the corner, exact as habit. It would become part of the story, and the story would become part of the evidence, and the evidence would become consequence. Maya fell asleep with the jacket folded on the chair instead of under her head. She did not need leather for a cushion anymore. She needed a morning made of paper and truth. Just before sleep closed her eyes, she felt the weight of the pen settle back against the receipt, future and past, sharing a pocket without argument, and she let that simple piece hold. The deed lay on the table like a sunlit slab of stone, heavy paper, raised seal, a notary stamp pressed so clean she could feel its chill through her fingertips. Riverside Holdings spelled itself with the kind of calm that keeps questions from growing teeth. Whitmore slid the closing packet toward her one page at a time. Each signature line, a small door she stepped through with the silver pen that had learned her name. Outside the window, the city's glass ribs caught morning and held it steady. Everything moved after that, the way a well-planned machine moved, without noise and without showing off. An escrow officer whose voice held like a level, a courier who cared about speed without trying to become it, a seller who needed the split clean and quick, divorce carving through decor, the way weather carves through paint. A bank pinged a confirmation and printed a line of tidy letters. And a time, the money crossed the river without looking down. By late afternoon, a key warmed in her palm as if a pocket had been waiting for it. She rode the Harley up the slow curve of Hillrest and turned into a circle of driveway that felt like a polite throat clearing. The house stood Mediterranean on purpose, stucco holding its breath, a roof of tile with the patience of old terracotta. Across the street, a larger estate watched from behind groomed hedges, and a gate that announced itself without raising its voice. Eleanor's house, the one that had kept her on the far side of its glass like weather. Now only a two-lane ribbon separated them. The street felt like stage spacing. She stood just inside the door and let the place tell her how it wanted to be lived. Tile cool under boots, a sweep of stairs that did not brag, a room that caught west light and turned it gentle. The air held the ghost of furniture polish and the sharp thread of lemon from a cleaner who believed in erasing fingerprints. In the kitchen, she opened a window and let the outside slide in. Trimmed lawn, a distant sprinkler ticking. A bird with a single urgent note. She did not bring a caravan. She made passes like a mechanic adjusting a carburetor, quarter turn by quarter turn. A box from the apartment and then another. Sarah's cup on the counter, enough to crown a room home. Tommy's chess set on a built-in shelf, knights and bishops lined like a quiet promise. The children ran up the stairs and down again and graded the echo as generous. In the garage, 3 clean bays stared back like a patient audience. Concrete wanted oil and hand tools and Saturdays. Something in her spine let go and settled. That first evening they camped on the living room floor with takeout in paper boxes, and the good rug rolled out like a flag of intent. Tommy chose a corner where trophies would not be visible to people who did not matter. Sarah claimed the sunroom for an art corner and announced she would paint the lemon smell to see if it had a color. Maya stacked folders on the dining table and placed the hospital rendering above them so its light fell across everything else. At dawn, on the second day, landscapers arrived across the street. Trucks whispered to a curb and released men with shovels and a glossy design packet. New hedges marched in a straight line. A narrow tree came out with the swift mercy reserved for mistakes. Eleanor appeared in an upstairs window for a single pause, a hand lifting a curtain, then vanished, the fabric closing with the smoothness of habit. Maya watered the rosemary by her own steps, not because it needed water, but because the hose let her stand in the open with an ordinary posture and a face that said nothing at all. On the third day, the phone spoke a name that had learned her for the wrong reasons: James Morrison, counsel to the Rodriguez family interests. Interests landed in her ear like a uniform. He mentioned the optics of her residential choice and asked whether the proximity was intended to provoke. Maya asked which legal concern he wished to place on the record. There was a pause, the length of a blink. He softened and suggested alignment around the children. She said the children were flourishing in ways that did not require his participation. She suggested he put future thoughts in writing, and she ended the call as one locks a door quietly rather than slamming it. Whitmore received a copy and replied with a message that smiled without showing teeth. "You are well positioned," he said. "The holding company remains the only name on the deed. Records will withstand any scrutiny that calls itself reasonable. If they escalate beyond reasonable, unreasonable will become expensive." She tuned the house the way she tuned an engine, a small frame by the kitchen door, Sarah's crayon family under the word home in uneven purple, the silver pen in a ceramic dish by the front table, so her hand would touch its cool weight upon leaving, and returning from the upstairs window, she took a picture not of the house across the street, but of the clean stripe of sky above it. She filed the image in a folder labeled Optics, not to weaponize it, but because she understood how attention behaves when wealth tries to stage manage weather. Big Jim rolled past at dusk on the fourth day and coasted to the curb. He removed his helmet with the reverence of a sacrament and surveyed the structure like a carpenter reading a beam. He nodded once, the nod he saves for things built square. He did not step onto the property until she waved him up. He leaned against the rail, looked at the sight lines, and said the place had good bones and clean exits. She told him about the lawyer's call. He grinned without showing teeth and said they always mistake silence for weakness. Let them talk to their mirrors. On the fifth day, a letter arrived. Cream stock thick as pride. Her name written by a hand that loved flourishes. The return address belonged to the Children's Hospital Foundation. The invitation unfurled its embossed type and welcomed Mrs. Maya Rodriguez to a night in support of pediatric cardiac care. A small note in a precise hand asked whether she would speak briefly about her motivation. The paper carried the faint scent of a printer that kept its schedule. She set the letter beside the rendering. The two items regarded each other like musicians agreeing on a key. She called Rebecca and said the gift must be attributed, not anonymous, and let her voice do the work those two words required. Rebecca understood at once. A public gift will lift the unit and position you without splash. We will route it through the foundation vehicle we have sketched, so the line from intention to impact is straight as wire. Your remarks will be brief and unapologetic. Later, Whitmore's assistant delivered a packet with the names of 3 boards, whose work matched hers without begging for attention. She marked the one that trained people to earn a trade rather than applaud a slogan. A security consultant offered adjustments that read like courtesy: replace 2 locks with hardware that prefers patience. Add a light at the side gate. Teach the alarm to whisper instead of shout. The children learned the new street at their own speeds. Tommy measured the walk to the bus stop like an opening gambit and asked to ride his bike if he wore the bright vest. She said yes, and he agreed with solemn care. Sarah discovered the lemon color after all, a pale gold with a breath of green. and taped the square above the sink and declared the room fixed. At night the house creaked in tile clicks, the little metronome of a place catching time. On the seventh morning, a dark sedan idled at the curb, while a suited man studied the house, with his phone low. Not paparazzi by manner, a lawyer's assistant by posture. Maya stepped onto the porch with a glass of water and stood in plain sun. The man looked up, uncertain, then drove on. A mirror, correctly angled, does not shout, it returns what it is shown. That evening she unzipped a garment bag and tried the midnight dress. It did not try to own the room. It learned her movement. Pearls waited in a small box, simple enough to read as established rather than new. In the bathroom, she practiced 2 sentences. She spoke of machines and children, not legacy. That word, she knew, belonged entirely to Eleanor, and she intended to hand it back. Empty, she said the lines once and let the echo fade like steam off glass. At the dining table, she arranged a sequence that would make sense if a stranger needed to understand the month by touch: deed packet, wire slip, hospital letter, gala invitation, a photo of a notary stamp in its book, a page number inked in careful block, a date written with square patience, evidence as respect for what must be done. Near sundown, Eleanor appeared at her garden gate. She set a hand on the latch as if testing the temperature of the day. Their eyes met across the trimmed grass and the blacktop. Maya lifted a small, ordinary wave, the kind one neighbor offers another. When there is mail to collect and weather to forecast and trash to roll, Eleanor did not wave back. Her silence was not contempt. It was the absence of vocabulary. Maya had offered a question Eleanor did not have the words to answer. Maya went inside and put the silver pen in its dish. The house made that tile click again, the metronome finding its mark. She poured tea and sat with the invitation one more time, then slid it into a folder marked events and wrote a single line on the list for morning. Call the director. Confirm remarks. Confirm plaque language. Confirm machines arrive before any speeches try to make meaning louder than help. Outside, the mirror across the street held steady in the fading light. The street narrowed to a single dark ribbon. The house breathed the way a house breathes when it understands it is being used as intended. Somewhere, a clock counted seconds without deciding who owned them. Maya felt the count and let it pass through her. The war of optics had begun, and she had chosen her brightness. Quiet, exact, and aimed, the ballroom shimmered with the kind of polish that comes from wealth rehearsed to perfection. Light glided over marble floors, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and ambition. Maya stood for a moment in the doorway, her dark gown holding the room's attention without asking for it. Pearls framed her collarbone like punctuation to a sentence not yet spoken. In her clutch rested the silver pen, a folded card with 2 sentences she had practiced until they felt like breath. Tonight would not be a performance. It would be proof. Dr. Williamson met her near the entrance, face lit by quiet triumph. "You look like the person who built this," she said, gesturing toward the banners that bore the hospital's crest. "The machines are already en route. All that remains is your name." Maya smiled, her composure wrapped around her like silk. "Thank you for holding the door open," she said, and moved toward the waiting crowd. Guests shimmered in clusters, their laughter rising and falling like engineered music. Photographers wandered with the gentle aggression of curiosity. At one end of the hall, a screen waited, still dark, connected to the drive Whitmore had sent over that morning, sealed and logged, time stamped and notarized. She had checked it herself in the side room, where the air smelled of cables and dust and confidence. The evidence had been filed, the signatures verified, the funds traceable by any honest accountant. All that remained was light. The murmur of conversation softened when Eleanor and Richard arrived. Eleanor's gown was a measured success in silver gray, her expression trimmed to perfection. Richard's tee matched his certainty, the same navy he had worn when he first told Maya she would never survive outside the family's shelter. They moved like an argument, rehearsed too many times. Eleanor's smile skimmed the room until it brushed against Maya's. It did not pause. It merely recalibrated. A donor approached Maya with the curiosity of polite envy. "How wonderful," she said, "that you've become so involved in healthcare. It's such a noble field." Maya answered evenly, "My husband died of a preventable failure. I'm trying to make that less common." The donor blinked, murmured agreement, and drifted away to safer topics. The evening unfolded with the precision of money well managed. Dinner, a soft video, polite tears, applause that began on cue and ended on schedule. Then Dr. Williamson took the stage. Her introduction was concise. "Our next speaker is the benefactor whose endowment has made the new pediatric cardiac suite possible." She paused. "Mrs. Maya Rodriguez." The room tilted as attention settled. Maya stood, the gown catching light without effort. At the podium, the microphone adjusted to her height as if it understood hierarchy. She rested the silver pen on the edge of the stand and looked out. "Good evening," she began, voice clear enough to carry without strain. "My name is Maya Rodriguez. 18 months ago, I stood in a room like this and learned that a heart can stop without making a sound. Tonight, my name will hang on a door that opens to machines built to give time back to children." That is the whole speech. The rest is gratitude and proof. She gestured slightly, and the first slide appeared on the screen. A scanned document, the wire transfer confirmation, crisp and dated, the stamp visible in the lower corner. A hush moved across the tables. The second slide followed. An endowment letter on hospital letterhead. Signatures firm, clauses precise. The third slide was a rendering. White walls, sterile light, a plaque that already bore her name. It was not a boast. It was direction. Marcus's name was nowhere visible, but it lived in the circuitry. She closed her speech with the 2 sentences she had practiced in the mirror of the motel, in the reflection of the garage window, in the quiet of her new house. "He believed in protecting the people he loved," she said. "I believe in machines that make protection measurable." "Thank you." The applause was not loud. It was long, the kind of sound that comes from recognition, not charity. When she stepped off the stage, the orchestra resumed with something gentle. Dr. Williamson clasped her hand once, brief and firm. "Proof enough," she murmured. Then Eleanor appeared, her perfume like winter flowers and calculation. "Maya," she said, a slow smile curling. "I had no idea you were so very involved." Her tone bent the word until it meant intrusion. Maya's reply was simple. "Involved is not the right verb. This is work." Eleanor's eyes flickered toward the projection where the rendering still looped in quiet repetition. "Your donation was generous," she said. "My friends wondered how you came into such means." Maya's expression didn't move. "Machines, paper, signatures, delivery dates," she said. "The rest is none of your business." Richard stepped forward, glass in hand, his charm already cracking. "We should discuss the children," he began, "about suitable schooling, proper company." The silver pen tapped once against her clutch, a single sound. "Mr. Morrison knows how to address a mailbox," she said. "If you have business, use it. Otherwise, enjoy the evening." The machines arrive next week. The final sentence carried no malice, only certainty. Richard hesitated, checked his watch, and then stopped himself. For the first time in years, he had no schedule to hide behind. Dr. Williamson returned just then, impeccable in timing. "Forgive me," she said to Eleanor with the kind smile that ends conversations. "We must finalize the plaque text." Eleanor inclined her head, eyes tight, and turned away. The crowd absorbed her retreat without noticing. Power, Maya thought, has learned new manners. In the service corridor behind the ballroom, air hummed cooler. A nurse stood there with a boy of 11 in a small suit jacket. He held a card with both hands. The handwriting was careful, letters pressed hard into paper. "Thank you for saving hearts like mine." It read, "I want to run again." Maya's throat tightened, but her voice stayed level. "Thank you," she said, "for reminding me why we build things." The nurse smiled, tears bright as glass. "He insisted on bringing it himself," she whispered. "He said he wanted to meet the lady who fixed the machines." Maya returned to the ballroom, quieter inside. At her table, the folder waited in her clutch. The stamped receipt, the sealed drive, the hospital schedule. Around here, conversations resumed, but she could feel the current had changed. Invitations were handed her like currency. A man from the technical college spoke of apprenticeships. She said she would read his proposal, knowing proposals were engines without oil, until someone laid hands on them. Across the room, Eleanor moved like porcelain that had just learned its crack. She glanced at Richard, but his attention stayed on Maya, and his face, once a ledger of control, registered something closer to concession. The clock above the exit marked the minute with quiet precision, and for the first time, Richard did not look at it. Later, near the elevators, Maya paused beside a tall window. The city reflected in the glass like a second audience. In that reflection, she saw Eleanor's group pass behind her, voices low, uncertain whether to harden or soften. Eleanor looked at Richard, searching for the familiar ritual of timekeeping, but he kept his eyes on Maya instead, and the glance held the weight of defeat. The race, Maya thought, had ended hours ago. Her phone vibrated. A sequence of messages. From Whitmore, "Well done. Documents verified." From Rebecca, "Foundation attribution placed exactly where you asked." From Eddie, "Shop owner ready to talk partnership. You were right about patience." Each text, a confirmation, each tone steady. She walked out into the marble lobby, where the air still smelled of citrus and polish. The valet brought the car, headlights sweeping the columns. She slipped inside, set the clutch beside her, and drew out the folded card. The ink from her pen gleamed faintly. "Equipment delivery. Inspection. Plaque install. Invite the staff who lift more than applause." It was not a to-do list. It was a creed. The city slid past her window, reflections of light on glass towers like quiet applause that had learned how to last. When she turned into Hillrest Drive, the street lay in its usual calm. The rosemary by her steps leaned with the night breeze. Across the street, Eleanor's house glowed behind drawn curtains. Maya Park sat for a moment and let the silence settle. Inside, the house greeted her with small sounds, the click of cooling tile, the hum of steady air. She placed the stamped receipt on the table beside the plan folder and touched the silver pen once. For the first time in years, her shoulders were unguarded. The machines would arrive before speeches hardened into story, and the woman across the street, who once owned the clock, would have to learn what time meant without control. Maya turned off the light, and the room held stillness like faith. In another house, Eleanor might have been searching for words that would not come, but Maya no longer needed words. She had built something that spoke in rhythm and proof, in numbers and heartbeat, in the quiet sound of a machine beginning to hum. Morning arrived like clear water on glass, soft and exact. Maya woke to the low hum of the house and the faint rhythm of tires turning somewhere down Hillrest. On the table lay the silver pen beside the stamped receipt from the gala, paper and metal side by side like yesterday. And tomorrow, shaking hands, she touched the ridge of ink and felt steadiness return, the kind that begins in the palm and travels to the spine. She brewed tea in the quiet kitchen and read the small list she had written the night before. Confirm delivery. Walk the room. Keep the paper clean. Thank the hands that lift more than applause. The list did not ask for victory. It asked for accuracy. At the foundation, the elevator sighed open, and Jennifer stepped out carrying a stack of envelopes. Real mail, she said, amused. A person in a hat delivered these. The top one wore a law firm, crest and expensive scent. Morrison and Keller had put her name on paper with careful ink. Maya slit the envelope and read a letter that hid knives inside grammar, concerns about optics, suggestions of impropriety, references to family stakeholders, promises of appropriate forums. She scanned the letter and sent it to Whitmore with a single line. Answer in writing. No meetings until the machines are installed. His reply arrived almost at once. Consider it done. We will make ink heavier than air. By late morning, she stood at the hospital loading dock, where trucks exhale and logistics has a kindly face. Pallets thumped, shrink wrap whispered. A forklift drifted like a patient animal. The perfusion unit rolled past on soft wheels and sang a gentle self-test chime. She felt something in her chest loosen that had been tight since the cemetery rain. The facilities manager, a man who spoke in small promises and kept them, walked the corridor with her. The air held one idea of temperature, and the floor was patient with weight. At the new door, blue tape framed a perfect rectangle. She handed him the plaque text. Spelling matters more than marble, she said. He smiled and tucked the paper into the clipboard as though tucking in a child. Near midday, Whitmore called. The letter is answered, he said. He read a paragraph that set down facts like ballast, documented chains of transfer, independent audits, foundation governance, a warning about defamation that did not raise its voice. There is also a request from Morrison, he added. He wants a meeting at the club. She laughed softly. A release valve easing. We will not carry our work onto white carpet, she said. If they want to look me in the eye, they can do it in the hall outside the machines. Let them ask a monitor about propriety. Her phone lit again. Eddie, transmission seller, wants to talk in the morning. He likes how the books look. Maya wrote back, bring the slow months and the quick months. Truth shifts the gear teeth without grinding. On the second day, the suite moved from imagination to room. Blue wrappers slid away. Câble mes ports. A nurse in clean shoes watched a younger nurse practice the wheel clearances. The perfusion unit hummed at a level that felt like a heartbeat measured by kindness. Maya stood back and did not direct, because respect knows when to remove its hand. Morrison arrived before noon. His shoes announced him, and the door closer sighed as if even the building wished to send him on his way. Eleanor followed, chin firm as an order. Richard came last, eyes searching the glass for his own face. Dr. Williamson met them with the calm that grows in the long nights of real work. She led them to a conference room with windows that looked into the bright hall. Thank you for seeing us, Morrison said, as if they had given him an audience beneath a portrait. He placed a polished folio on the table and kept only a pen in hand. We have concerns, he began, about the source of funds and the use of names and the risk to children from haste. The words were school-trained and precise, and they did not reach the machine. Whitmore slid papers across the table with the practiced care of a man who trusts content more than tone. Wire confirmation, he said. Endowment agreement, auditor letters. foundation determination from the Revenue Service, asset identifiers. You never knew because you never owned them. If you intend to take these suggestions into the air, we will answer in rooms where a judge keeps time, not in gossip. Eleanor watched the pages the way a person watches a foreign language and refuses to learn a single verb. Our concern is not charity, she said in a bored voice. It is the suddenness with which someone of limited means appears with capacity. Her smile bent at the corners. Maya opened her thin folder and set it on the table where anyone could read it who understood paper. The motel receipt, room number and dates pressed clear. Rosa's payroll slips, her name written with the heavy hand of habit. Early invoices from the garage, neat cereals like winter Twix. A photocopy of the notice to quit, seal, catching the light like a cold coin. She did not push the papers. She let them be seen. You changed the locks on a Friday evening, she said, and the air cooled by a degree. You made my children watch home become a building. You speak of reputation as if it were linen, to be laundered and folded. My husband built a second life you did not own. He wrote me a map. I walked it. The machines are here. Names can catch up if they like. Richard tried to stand on familiar ground. There were contracts, he said. Agreements before marriage. Custodianship of a family name. We had to act. The phrase rang against the glass. In the hall, a cartwheel squeaked, and then learned better manners. Morrison looked briefly tired, the way a man looks when he has to manage clients as well as opponents. We are not disputing the hospital's right to accept a gift, he said. Lower now. We ask that any use of the Rodriguez name follow established propriety. The hospital accepts the gift in the donor's name, Dr. Williamson said. Her voice, even as a level, the plaque bears her name because that is a fact. If you wish to dispute facts, do so where the walls are wood and the transcripts are permanent. Whitmore set a final envelope on the table. If you carry these insinuations into public air, he said, here is what we will file. Defamation, interference, sanctions. The stamp space is ready. Eleanor rose, pride pulling her up by the spine. We will not be addressed in this manner, she said, but the words did not travel far. She turned to the window and looked out at the hall, where a nurse was teaching a younger nurse how to move a stand without touching the sterile field. On the glass, Eleanor could see her own face tilt and then still. You are in our world now, Dr. Williamson said gently. Here the rules are different. We change dressings and settings and outcomes. We do not change locks on children. They left without courtesy. In the corridor, Richard raised his wrist by reflex and stopped before he checked the time. Eleanor spoke to him in a tight undertone. He did not answer. The door eased shut, and the room expanded again to its true size. By evening, the plaque had been hung. Brass warmed to the light and held it like a promise. A custodian realigned the plate because the level's bubble wanted attention, then stepped back with a grin. Straight as truth, he said, and wheeled the cart away. News moved through the city like a good breeze. The club shifted a spring event to a smaller room. Eleanor's committee role slipped into something advisory and quiet. The hospital released a short notice that named machines by serial and thanked those who had carried weight. Comments were dull and kind, the best kind. At the garage the next morning, Eddie slapped a file on the counter and beamed. We got the transmission shop, he said. Terms we can live with. He hugged her quick, smelling of solvent and coffee. Teach me how not to scare when paper looks tall, he said. Papers are gears, she answered. Oil them with facts and let them turn. Near dusk, a courier brought another cream envelope. This one had learned humility. Morrison withdrew his intended inquiry and offered an apology with no adverbs to weaken it. Whitmore forwarded a line of his own that was dry and sufficient. Filed. He wrote, "Done." Maya set both behind the motel receipt and the notice to quit, and the wire and the installer checklist and the plaque proof, under a tab that said lock. Evidence does not forget. It waits its turn. She stood at the kitchen window and watched shadows lengthen on Hillrest. Across the street, curtains breathed and then went still. The rosemary by her steps had pushed out new growth, tender and scented like beginning. Tommy came in from the patio with a chess book under his arm. "If you keep the rook straight long enough," he said, "sometimes the board opens in a way that surprises the other side." He looked at the pen. "You did not lose." "Right." The question was more lesson than doubt. "I did not lose," she said. "The difference matters?" He nodded, as if putting the sentence on a shelf where he kept useful tools. Sarah ran in with paint on her fingers. "I made a heart," she said. "The machines need someone to make what they keep." Maya kissed the top of her head and left a small scent of tea in her hair. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. "Your angels fixed the motel dryer and would not take money." Another from Big Jim. Proud. "No parades, just miles." She let the messages rest on the screen for a long breath, grateful for loyalty that does not ask to be seen. The doorbell rang with the measured patience of someone who knows there is no hurry left. Morrison stood on the step with his tie slightly unequal to gravity. "I have papers," he said, and held out a manila envelope like a life ring, a formal withdrawal, an apology in my client's language. She took it. "Thank you," she said, and meant the completion of a circuit rather than the man. A child rode past on a small bike, the freewheel ticking like a bright metronome. On the table, she opened the envelope and read, then placed the sheets behind the tab called locks. Another email chimed. "Whitmore," a short note, attached to nothing, more thought than letter. "The first lien against the Hillrest residence will mature next week." He wrote, "An old debt purchased quietly years ago by a holding company with a thoughtful name. Marcus planned well. The final lock turns of its own accord." Maya closed her eyes and let the sentence settle like a key, finding the last tooth in a cylinder. She would not need to move a finger. Sometimes justice travels under its own steam. She wrote one more line on the yellow pad. "Invite the nurses to sign the back of the plaque before it is sealed. Let the people who lift more than applause leave their names where power cannot pry." Then she uncapped the pen and signed the bottom of the page, not as a performance, but as the last quiet act of a day that had done what it promised. Outside, a sprinkler stitched sound into the grass. Across the street, a light went off in the Rodriguez kitchen, as if the house itself had decided to learn a new grammar for night. Somewhere in the city, a machine found rhythm in human hands and kept it steady. Locks waited for honest keys. Hingshill. And on a wall that smelled faintly of lemon and antiseptic, brass carried a name that had learned how to be heavy and kind at the same time. The morning unfolded with the quiet steadiness of something already decided. Maya woke to the faint sound of wind tracing the eaves of the Hillrest house, the air sharp and new. Across the street, the Rodriguez home stood still, curtains drawn, a truck parked out front, with men moving boxes wrapped in brown paper. The small sign planted in the lawn was white, discreet, and final. No voices rose. No confrontation followed. The world was simply rearranging itself, according to a plan that had always been in motion. She stood by the window and watched until the truck door closed with a gentle metallic sigh. Justice did not shout. It signed its name and left. By 8, she was at the foundation. The office smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Jennifer had already sorted the morning folders into clean stacks. Scholarship renewals, apprenticeship approvals, correspondence from the technical college. Everything had rhythm now, like breath that no longer needed to be forced. Maya sat at the long table where sunlight gathered, and read through each document carefully, writing small notes in the margins in her clean, measured hand. Approve with condition on attendance. Verify proof of hours. Add clause for continued mentorship. Each correction felt like a hinge turning true. She walked to the training bay afterward. The space echoed with the low song of tools and engines, the language of hands learning. A girl in coveralls adjusted a carburetor while another checked torque values from a printed sheet. Their laughter was quiet but real. The foreman nodded when Maya passed and pointed to a board on the wall covered in photographs, students and their first jobs, mothers in uniforms, young men holding certificates, as if holding breath. Maya stopped and looked at the faces, every one of them a fact that could never be erased by rumor or law. She thought of Marcus then, not as ghost, not as loss, but as structure, the beams beneath what still stood. In the afternoon she drove to the hospital. The city moved around her, ordinary and unknowing. The new wing shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Inside, the corridor carried the faint scent of polish and citrus. At the far end, a group waited near the plaque. Nurses, a technician, the custodian who had once aligned it. They smiled when they saw her. She opened a folder, and there it was, an unmarked sheet of brass, the back of the plaque that had been left unfinished on purpose. She placed it on the table, handed out the pen, and said, "Write your names where no camera can reach." One by one, they stepped forward. The pen passed between hands. Each name was deliberate, small but weighty. The custodian wrote last, printing his letters with care. When he looked up, his grin was the shape of pride. Maya added her name in the lower corner. The ink gleamed and then dried. Quiet as the air around them, she looked at the workers, their uniforms clean but frayed, their faces steady. "Thank you," she said simply. The plaque would be sealed tomorrow, and their names would stay hidden behind the metal forever. Proof for no one but time. On the drive back to Hillrest, the sky hung wide and blue. Traffic moved in measured streams. At the red light near the river, she saw the Rodriguez moving van again, turning onto the highway, its rear door closed and padlocked. In the cab, a driver she did not recognize tapped his steering wheel in time with the radio. Behind him, the boxes shifted gently. She did not wave. She did not need to. The sound of the engine fading was enough. That evening the garage was warm and smelled of rubber and rain. Eddie was bent over a new ledger, his handwriting uneven but determined. "We're official," he said when she entered. "The second shop is ours. The bank tried to talk in circles, but we brought the right kind of straight lines." He slid the papers to her. She read them slowly, tracing the notary stamp, the date written in words, the ink dry and final. Outside, two apprentices cleaned tools and sang softly with a radio that only half believed in tuning. Maya smiled, not at victory, but at motion, gears meshing where silence once lived. Later, a man from the technical college arrived with a binder. He spoke of night classes, shared resources, and a growing wait list of students. "We can train 20 more by spring." He said, "We have the space, but not the tools." Maya gestured toward the garage. "Tools we can share. What matters is that they learn how to listen when a machine speaks." He nodded, grateful and tired, and she saw in his eyes the same hunger she once knew, wanting not wealth, but witness. Night came soft. At home, Tommy arranged a chessboard under the lamp, each piece standing like a small truth. He pointed at an open line. "You left this lane empty on purpose," he said. She looked at the board and nodded. "Some openings are meant for air." Sarah sprawled on the rug, drawing hearts and wires on a page. When she held it up, The picture showed a machine surrounded by hands. "For the hearts that keep working," she said. Maya bent and kissed her head. "For the hands that help them," she whispered. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rosa. "The dryer sings again. Tamales on Saturday. Bring the kids." Another from Big Jim followed. "Short. As always. You did it. Quiet suits you." She let the messages sit there like lights in the dark. Before bed, she opened the drawer in her study. Inside lay the motel receipt, the payroll slips, the notarized form, the apology letter, and now the foundation ledger, past and future sharing the same space. She stacked them neatly, like chapters bound by silence instead of glue. When she closed the drawer, the sound was gentle and sure. Near midnight, she stepped outside. The night carried the smell of rosemary and rain beginning somewhere else. Across the street, the Rodriguez house stood empty, the porch light off. For the first time, Hillrest felt like a street without an argument. She sat on the steps and watched the wind comb the grass. Somewhere, a machine in the hospital made a steady sound that could have been mistaken for breathing. She imagined Marcus in that rhythm, not watching but continuing. She went back inside, checked the locks, and found both children asleep, the board unfinished, the drawing drying in crayon. She took the silver pen from its case and set a small card on the table. The pen felt balanced, weighted by everything it had written and everything it still could. She wrote in long, deliberate lines, the words steady and final. They were not addressed to anyone, though they would find who needed them. When she was done, she set the card beside the ledger and capped the pen with a soft click that sounded like completion. Outside, the sprinklers began, sowing sound into the dark lawn. The house breathed as if satisfied. The city turned another quiet page. On the table, the ink cooled to black. In that stillness, she heard it, the whisper of justice signing its name at last, not in heat or noise, but in cold, clean ink that never lied. In the end, Maya's story is not just about winning back what was taken from her. It's about reclaiming dignity in a world that often confuses silence with weakness. Her journey reminds us that real strength isn't loud. It's the steady courage to face injustice without losing our humanity. Life will always test our patience, our faith, and our sense of worth, but as the saying goes, gold is not afraid of fire. What's genuine in us? Honesty, compassion, resilience only shines brighter after it's been through the flames. This story asks each of us to look closely at the walls we build around pain, the silence we keep because it feels safer, the compromises we accept because we fear starting over. It reminds us that breaking free from toxic control or prejudice doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it simply means standing your ground, quietly, until the truth has nowhere else to go but forward. Justice, as Maya learned, isn't a dramatic moment. It's a series of small, deliberate choices to stay kind, stay steady, and keep signing your name on what's right. The reward is not applause, but peace. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to fight back? Not with anger, but with quiet determination. I'd love to hear your reflection. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that challenge, heal, and inspire. May your nights be calm, your heart steady, and your path, no matter how rough, lead you toward peace and purpose.